Okay, hello everybody. So, my name is Oisin, I'm CTO and co-founder at Obal, and today we're going to talk about distributed validators and specifically how they impact solo stakers. So, what I'm going to talk about is, for those of you that are unfamiliar, I'm briefly going to touch on distributed validators, including some of the architecture decisions we've made as Obal when making them. Then I'm going to get into some of the pain points in solo staking, talk a bit about the kind of history of it and how I got into the space and worrying about stake centralization. Then we'll look at how DVs can actually be of use to solo stakers. And then lastly, and most importantly, we're going to talk about how you can get involved today in squad staking. So for those of you that haven't seen any of my stuff before, we're going to talk about what are distributed validators. So a distributed validator is an Ethereum validator that runs on multiple machines instead of one, and it has fault tolerance. You can think of it like a multi-sig for a validator, where not everyone has to be online and signing all at the same time. This is particularly useful for solo stakers and people that don't have perfect uptime, or 24/7 SRE team that can look around and manage things. And what's also particularly special about it is you don't need the same entity running every piece of the validator. You can have 4 different people running 4 different pieces, or 7 or more. And beyond that, and going a little more into the technical details, one of the things that I'm particularly happy with about how we've gone and built distributed validators is the idea of making them a middleware, which means that Caren, our client, sits between a validator client and a consensus client and only intercepts the REST traffic between them, but does not have runtime access to the private keys. I think this is super important for a number of reasons, security frankly being top of them. If ever there was something that went wrong with the Caren client, it might show something slashable to the downstream validator, but the downstream validator has its own slashing database. It says, I've already signed something at that slot height, I'm not doing it again, and you don't get slashed, nor do your kind of keys get decrypted and exfiltrated or anything of the sort. It's also useful for people, and particularly enterprises, that have their own private key infrastructure. It's a really big ask to say, hey, swap that out and put in our software. Instead to say, no, you just need to add a middleware to your stack, but other than that, you keep your own key management system. This is kind of a big thing for both adoption and, again, most importantly, security. What's also important is you can and should mix and match all of the different validator and consensus clients within it. You should have in all of your different nodes, different ELs, different CLs, different validator clients. And if there's a 0-day or compromise in any of the pieces of software in that stack, so long as it's only a subset of the node, that really reduces the risk that something will go very wrong. Another piece of the puzzle for those of you that haven't seen it before is what we call the distributed validator launchpad, or the DV launchpad. This you can think of as a successor to the ETH staking launchpad, which was an interface developed by the EF and consensus to facilitate the creation of validators. The DV launchpad serves the same purpose, and it particularly focuses on helping groups come together to create distributed validators. If you run all the pieces yourself, you can just kind of create the keys using the CLI. But if you have multiple different entities around the world coming together to run these, you want to know that you're working with the people you expect. So everyone signs messages with their well-known ledger addresses, their ENS names. You can deploy smart contracts that help divide out the rewards, and you can generally have good confidence that you're running these things with who you expect, because if you're running them against Sybil attackers or someone that you don't trust, there's decent reason to be concerned. So now I want to talk a little bit about the challenges of solo staking, and I want to lead with the question, is staking from home easy yet? Anybody gonna staunchly defend saying it's easy to run a validator? Yes, I was suspecting. So I think solo staking is getting much, much easier over the last few years, but I still think there's a long way to go. Some of the difficulties of it, first and foremost, is needing north of $50,000 to take part. Or you can join a liquid staking protocol, which is another piece of the puzzle. The one that kind of galls me is the being on call 24/7, 365. I find very reliably my node will always die when I leave and I'm out of the country for a few weeks. Bandwidth caps matters to some people that don't have kind of unlimited all-you-can-eat data. I know my parents were really unhappy with me when I burned through all the internet in their house because I had an uncapped kind of amount of peers running. Lots of the world don't have the most stable access to power. They experience kind of power outages, maybe load shedding. This can, at the very minimum, knock your validator offline. At a more worst case, it can corrupt your database and force you to resync. Hardware dying is one that hopefully you don't get run into all that often, but if your disk dies and you have to get a new one, that's quite a bit of like downtime and outage as you buy another one from Amazon, install it, sync it, and get it up and running. Version updates, not too bad. Technical expertise is coming a lot down. Credit to like the work of the node launchers around the space, including the DApp nodes, the Avados, Stereums, ETH Dockers, and so on. And even just generally trying to keep kind of high uptime, high rewards nodes isn't the easiest thing yet. But thankfully to a lot of people that are here today, it is definitely getting easier. So briefly, I wanted to talk about where I got into staking, and it was actually 5 years ago yesterday when I wrote this article. But at the time, I had kind of come to grips with the proof of work energy usage, and I was like, okay, this isn't really going to work. What is like the alternative people are focusing on? And I was introduced to this idea of like proof of stake, and I was like, cool, let me have a bit of read of it, see what it's about. And at the time, it was 2,048 Ether minimum, which was about, I don't know, $500,000 at the time. And slashing was kind of ill-defined, but implicitly it could have been like all of your stake could be slashed. And with those two things in mind, I wrote this article called The Staking Problem, which is effectively, this is too hard and too scary, and if this isn't your core business model, you will outsource this to somebody else to do in a professional context. And given 5-10 years, my fear was that everybody would end up like outsourcing this to enterprises, and that there would be 3 main entities that had like total control over the stake. And my fear was not necessarily that they would have like stolen money, but my fear was they would have done something non-credibly neutral, begun to censor, begun to kind of maliciously like weaponize forks against people. And that was kind of my concern with staking at the time. And I was frankly a little bearish and maybe even suggesting we could like, think a bit longer. However, over the course of the years, the technology improved a lot. One of them being the adoption of BLS signatures allowed the stake to come down to 2,048 Ether. And there was a talk at DevCon 5 in Osaka by these two gentlemen from the Ethereum Foundation, Carl and Donkrod, with the help of a DTA as well, where knowing that BLS signature schemes were homomorphically additive, they were trying to tell the world there is a better type of validator we can make now. We can make a validator that runs like a multisig, as we use the words now. This is kind of the foundation of what distributed validator technology is. And I actually didn't see this live. I would have seen it in early 2020 while I was building Block Daemons ETH2 staking, and I was immediately a convert. I was like, perfect. Highly available validators, validators that run on multiple machines, validators that can be run by multiple people. This is definitely going to be a thing. And 5 years later, or 3 years from this, that's kind of where we're at. I'm super chuffed that through all of like the showings today and all the different schedules, there's so many teams talking about DVT for this, that, squad staking, and so on. So that brings me to why DVs, particularly for solo stakers. I can understand I spent a lot of time pitching it to like the enterprise side of things, but maybe not as much talking about on the solo staker side. So the first and foremost one for me is the idea that you can have, normal solo staker level of like time, dedication, uptime, but end up with, 3 nines or nearly immaculate uptime due to the fact that you have a group. And so long as, 3 out of 4 of you are online or 5 out of 7 of you are online, your validator will be online. This allows you to kind of accept going on holidays and having your node breaking and fixing when you come back, or not having a totally ready to go second staking machine synced and like ready for a failover, and not, paging yourself in the middle of the night when your validator goes offline. Things like that will generally allow solo stakers to be indifferent from like enterprise performance. And that's one of the big things that I think is important for moving more of the stake onto like solo stakers and away from kind of, the cloud, frankly. This idea of lowering maintenance overhead is kind of what I'm talking about with disks. I got caught a while ago where I did not prune my disk in time and ended up filling it up to the brim, and then couldn't prune because pruning needs disk space. So my only option was just to like nuke the disk and like resync the full node. That would have been, a couple of days of downtime had I been solo staking. But this node was actually part of a distributed validator cluster, so it didn't miss like a single attestation, which was very handy. One of the big ones, which I'm going to talk about a little more in some of the coming up slides, is the idea that with distributed validators, it becomes more acceptable to have solo stakers take part in liquid staking protocols, because you don't need to trust them the same way you do when they have like total control over the validator key. I'll dig into that a little bit more as we talk about EtherFi and Operation Solo Staker and Lido Simple DVT module. And the last one on this is related to the kind of collateralized liquid staking protocols, the kind of rocket pools and others. At the moment, they're all doing lots of good work trying to take their bonds down safely, but without exposing their protocol to risk. 8 Ether is still, frankly, a huge amount of money for a lot of the world, especially for like young people. If you can instead have 4 people all together put in 2 Ether and run a mini pool with a group, that is, another way for you to kind of continue to bring down these collateralization requirements without, risking the protocol itself. You just say, let's all team up and do so. So, how can you actually take part? One of the things that I'm delighted to announce, and we announced it just the last while, is that we're now in open beta, and we're encouraging everybody that wants to and has the means to run one validator on mainnet. And we're still keeping it capped at one validator for the time being. And we have a couple extra pieces of the puzzle that I want to draw your attention to. So the DV Launchpad, I've already talked about. That's the user interface for setting up validators. But now as we kind of move into beta and away from alpha, we're starting to focus more on developers of liquid staking protocols and just general staking solutions. And the 2 pieces that might be of interest to you guys are the SDK that we've now shipped, which is a TypeScript SDK to provision distributed validators and to retrieve the deposit data after key generation ceremonies. This allows you to, hide the use of DVs behind your user interface, make it kind of like a native part of your flow. And the other piece that I'm probably nearly more bullish on is what we call obal splits. These are smart contracts based on the splits.org team work, which allows you to, without any upgradability, any mutability, and without any oracle, split Ethereum validator rewards deterministically across a number of operators and the protocol itself. So this is something that I've been working on when I tried to make NFT validators in about 2020, and it wasn't really feasible until the post-merge. And we've recently completed an audit with it that you can see on our website. But I'd highly recommend if the smart contract side of this is what you're interested in. These things can scale to thousands of validators, and there's no editability or no trust assumptions bar your usual smart contract risk. And last but not least, Caren, our middleware client, is going from strength to strength. We're just beginning a second audit of it now, and we're continuing to add features and improve its resilience. One of the next ones we're working on is partial deposits to make it easier to deposit into something like Rocket Pool and the likes. So from December 1st, what you can do is you can team up with other people, find a squad. I highly recommend finding them today while you have all of the solo stakers in the ecosystem around. You can go on to the beta Launchpad, or I would strongly recommend do this on Holsky or Gurley if you haven't run a mainnet validator before. Please, be sensible. You can, set up your distributed validator, pick the withdrawal address, fee recipient, so on. You do your distributed key generation ceremony, make backups of your keys, turn on your nodes, make sure they're connected, all the nodes synced, everyone's ready to go, and then activate your deposit and activate the validator. We are also working on a credentialing kind of effort at the moment where we'll be issuing non-transferable NFTs to anybody that runs validators successfully on mainnet or testnet, because there's a lot of liquid staking protocols in the space that want more solo stakers, but trying to figure out how to kind of due diligence them and understand whether or not they're credible or not has been kind of difficult. So our step in that direction is to just drop NFTs to people that have run validators, so you can kind of look at them and be like, yeah, they're holding a testnet and a mainnet, technical credential. They probably know how to run a DV. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of ways to get involved, particularly on mainnet, is with EtherFi's Operation Solo Staker. Operation Solo Staker is an initiative started by the team a number of months ago in participation with DAppNode Avado as well. And the idea behind it is EtherFi wanted to have solo stakers running their nodes from the very beginning. So they did kind of an open call for applications, received a huge amount of interest, made a selection of some of the early adopters, and sent them DAppNode and Avado machines to their homes, helped them get them set up, established running DV clusters, and then began activating validators on them. I think at this point they now have 40 solo stakers from 35 countries around the world taking part, and chatting to Iridian, I think the plan is to scale this up even more in the near term, so go find them if you want to get involved. The other main initiative on mainnet for distributed validators is on the Lido front. Lido have recently passed a proposal to put 0.5% of their stake on distributed validators as part of the Simple DVT module. Simple DVT will be their first foray into running distributed validators on mainnet, and it will also be the first time that solo stakers will take part in Lido as a curated operator. Currently we're doing a kind of a dress rehearsal on Holski with them as like a final kind of practice before go live. There are 212 operators taking part in obal clusters, and if all of them were to go to mainnet, that would be the guts of a 500% increase in Lido's operator set. So I'm really bullish about that, and if you can find Will Shannon around, he'll be talking about Simple DVT, I believe. And yeah, that should hopefully be on in mainnet of this year, or mainnet early in the new year, and they will be doing multiple like waves of onboardings. So if you do want to get involved, there should be an application form somewhere on the internet. And one of the last things to touch on is the dev side. These, EtherFi and Lido are just two examples, but there's a lot more liquid staking and just staking projects generally out there. I'd strongly encourage you to have a look at the SDK and the splits, use them together. I think they make great building blocks that are low trust and helpful to allow distributed validators to be incorporated into your product. And the idea being you deploy the Solidity, set up the splitters as you so choose, create the distributed validator that exits to set of splitters, and then you get your node operators to run, create the keys, and then activate the validators. The last piece of the puzzle on the development side is we're putting a lot of focus in getting distributed validators built into all of the public good community launchers. So that's your kind of ETH Docker, your Ethereum, Sedge, Dapnode Novato, obviously, and more. We're super keen to have DVs to be, the easiest type of validator you can launch. So if you're involved with or working in any of those packages or products, would love to chat to you about it afterwards. And one of the last things I want to talk about is kind of the community side of staking. So squad staking is this idea that you run with your squad. You run with people your friends, people that will like back you up when your node is offline, and when when theirs are offline, you got their back. Yesterday we were at the SheFi summit, and SheFi is a group of like women in crypto that train each other how to use DeFi, use staking, and so on. Their current cohort is ongoing. They have about 400 people learning at the moment, and obal will be doing the staking week, where we will get them all to be doing distributed key generation and creating validators. And my goal between SheFi and all the other communities, ETHStaker being a great example, is to have loads of people able to set up DVs together. We have workshops going on. There was one just half an hour ago here. Iridian is doing one with EtherFi. I believe there will be many more workshops going on. But my goal is that you and your 3 friends, 5 friends, whatever, can set up a distributed validator and can seek delegation. You can run your own stakewise vault. You can put it into NodeSet. You can apply for Lido. All of these things is generally how I want to see the kind of staking market mature, and not be in a world where it's all just like big enterprises, but it's instead people staking with their friends. So yeah, that's more or less the thing I want to leave you with, guys, is it's time to make squad staking a reality. Run nodes if you can, develop with them if you can, and would love to get more people taking part in ETH Proof of Stake Consensus. That's me. Thank you very much, everyone. Might do a few questions.
Thank you, Oisin. That was awesome. Any questions from the audience?
Just a really simple, practical question to start around, like what we often call T and N. Is this configurable at all? What I mean, the threshold, the number and the threshold, is it configurable in any way? Like I can have, I need 2 signers out of 15, or is there certain requirements there? And how should one think about these trade-offs?
You could. We generally would not recommend changing it off of what the default is. So the default is strictly 2/3 or strictly 2/3 plus 1 of the number, because there's a consensus mechanism involved. And if, for example, you had fewer than that, let's say you had a 7-node cluster but only 2 to sign, 2 different groups could sign something and be slashable. But instead it's if you keep 5 as the threshold, and your consensus works, there shouldn't be a scenario where you sign 2 slashable messages. So yes, it actually is there in an advanced flag if you want to go change it, but it's probably safest to use the default.
So obviously the Caren middleware is running alongside the usual clients. Hello, 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 hello. Yeah, so Caren is running alongside the usual clients, so it's like yet another piece to this, stack of clients that ever seems to be growing. MevBoost and 2 clients, and now Caren as well. So is there increased hardware requirements if you're trying to run obal at home, or what's the situation?
Good question. The increase is pretty negligible. Caren will use 60 to 100 megabytes of RAM. So if you are not cutting it extremely fine, you should be able to include that. And it doesn't really have any disk. It just has its config file, so a couple of kilobytes of disk. So the main thing maybe is the peer-to-peer communication. But again, that's kilobytes a second, so nothing relative to actually running a beacon node.
Any more questions? Alrighty, well, thank you guys for coming to this talk. The next talk in this room is actually canceled, so we're going to resume here with some more talk about DVT and the Diva team at 2:45. Let's give it up for Oisin one more time.
Thank you very much, everybody.